Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Finance Committee. It is March 13th, 2025. It is a little after 4 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over Local Access Channel 8 and through the town website at www.ma.gov. And I'll go to the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is the Cape Cod Tech, and we have a representative here, if you'd like to join us. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Before you start, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that we need to make sure that we're using our microphones here, so that not only can everybody hear, listen, but the folks, we have quite a few people Zooming in today, so I just want to make sure that everybody can hear what everybody is saying. So I'll let you introduce yourself and proceed from there.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me this afternoon. My name is Erin Orcutt, and I am the School Business Administrator for Cape Cod Tech. Thank you for having me. Dr. Sanborn sends his well wishes. We typically divide and conquer because of all of the presentations, and I usually pick Eastham because I like Eastham.
What does that mean for the other towns?
It means I really like your early meetings.
Okay.
I thought it was me.
Well, that Rich. No, you guys have a great crew. I am presenting to you our FY26 operating budget. This budget was made in consultation with Dr. Sanborn, our superintendent, as well as our finance subcommittee, which right now is chaired by Mr. Tullio and also Mr. Michaud and Mr. Galazzi. Excuse me. So this is our FY26 enrollment broken out by town. As you can see, we increased by 19 students this year. We increased from 662 students to a total enrollment of 681 students. I can definitely say this is a height for enrollment since I've been at the school, and we just seem to be continuing to trend upwards. For your town, though, this year, it was a 2-student decrease. Really, your numbers fluctuate, but usually in the 1s or 2s. This year, our biggest swings were definitely in the towns of Barnstable and Brewster, as well as Dennis. So your assessment will reflect 2 students less enrolled at Cape Cod Tech this year.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
What is the total number of students that the school will allow to have in there?
So technically, the school was built with an overall enrollment design of 650 students. That is set by the Department of Education and the Mass School Building Authority. That 650 number, though, is at 85% capacity. So really, that says that we could have about 700, maybe a slightly over. This is a very good number for us, a very tight number for us, because although some areas of our school could accommodate a few more students, when you get into some of our programming and teacher ratios that are allowed in some of the shops, really we've fit the amount of kids that we can fit in there right now. We might take 1 or 2 going forward, but this really is, this number in the high 6s is definitely where our comfort level is.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the 681 is basically a number you decided was your cap pretty much?
We try to keep the classes balanced mostly, and it's what we can fit in between our shops and some of our academic programming. And so typically we try to invite in the same number in the class that balances out really who they're going to be in shop with. So it happens, our freshmen are in shop with 11th graders, so if we had a really big 11th grade class, we might restrict a few more enrollments in the 9th grade. But right now, we haven't announced, we have not announced the new students coming in for next year, but this past year at this time, we had 457 applications for 180 spots.
I was just going to ask you, how many, so quite a few people did not get in?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we don't have the space for everybody, and we were only able to let in about over 1/3.
That's quite a big jump.
It is quite different than the way it used to be. It's very, I would say competitive in that, and I think we put out a good product. People see that, and we certainly have a lot of interest. There's a lot of movement on the Cape, there's a lot of options, and I like to think that our region, our community really values technical education and what value it brings, and I think that's definitely reflected in our enrollment, and our enrollment, I think, has also increased because we do have a beautiful, brand-new, state-of-the-art building.
Is the same true of Upper Cape Tech in terms of applications versus acceptance?
Yes, they typically have more applications than room for students, but their campus is a lot different, and they can accommodate more students, so they are definitely at least 100 students higher than we are, and I think they have the capacity to increase that the way our building is, we do not at this time.
So you haven't sent out the notices yet?
We have not accepted the new next year's freshman class yet.
This is 681 is your best guess?
The 681, how our enrollment is found is on October 1st. So in this case, it was October 1st of 2024. That's our enrollment count. So that 681 is what the state tells us to go forward with for the next year's. Basically, your assessment looks back 1 year as far as the enrolled students. So in October of 2025, I'll have a better idea of where everything shakes out, where everybody, where the students are coming from, and then I communicate that number to Rich so he can have a good idea of if your number is going to fluctuate greatly.
Last question. So when the kids apply, do they apply for a certain program, to a certain shop?
No, all of our freshman students go through something called exploratory. Exploratory starts the week that they walk into school, and it goes roughly through the end of January. Students are not placed into their shop until February. So what that does is it allows a routine for them to explore all of our 15 shops. They spend at first a half a day in each shop, and then from there, they whittle down their choices to their top 7, and then their top 4. But they do progress through each program, so they get exposure to each program. So our freshmen have spent approximately 2 to 3 weeks right now in their chosen shop. They also learn, they get certified in OSHA and CPR typically in that time, so they learn a lot about safety before they've even entered into that shop in the spring.
You were saying some shops are more crowded than others. So do you try to steer them into the?
No, it's really whatever the maximum number we can take in that shop, and sometimes that's set by.
Sometimes the freshmen couldn't get it, won't be able to get it.
Absolutely. There's often freshmen who, that's why they rank their first through fourth choice. Their placement in the shop is based upon how well they did during exploratory. Excuse me. So even if a student, I use the example, even if you didn't want to be an electrician, but you go through the electrical shop, as long as you're safe, you're wearing the proper clothing, you're a good citizen, you come to school, you get graded for that. And so that increases your eligibility or your options to be able to be placed in your top shop, really. So the kids that, it's not about taking tests or anything like that, it's the kids that, the students that are showing that they want to be there, that they're excited about it, they come to school prepared every day, they're polite with their instructor. Those are the students that typically get to go where they'd like to go.
Just in case.
Often our shops are dictated by plumbing, for example. The state plumbing board typically sets numbers of how many students can be with teachers. So each one of our shops really does have a maximum number that we're allowed, that we could really enroll students in.
Thanks.
No problem. Again, this is the same information, just in a graphical formation. You can easily see from this, about half of our enrollment is made up from the towns of Yarmouth and Barnstable. But Brewster, Harwich, and Dennis are definitely some of our other larger contributors, with Eastham sending approximately 3.8% of our overall enrollment. Again, just showing you an overall enrollment trend, as I mentioned previously. This is really the height of what I've seen. This is my going into my 18th year at Cape Cod Tech, and I've really never seen the enrollment quite this high. Really, it's pretty standard. It only fluctuates in the ones and twos, but the enrollment has stayed steady, I would say, from our lower Cape towns as well. So our budget, the FY '26 budget, as you can see, this number is a little staggering for what we typically come in at. This is an increase of $993,000 over the current FY '25 budget. As you can see in previous years, aside from last year, we've done our best really to stay in that 3% range. This year, we simply are not able to. I will talk about some of the cost drivers that really have inflated this budget, not to shift the spotlight, but I do know a lot of schools, locally and statewide, are also really in the same position that we are. And a lot of our cost drivers are really inflated by new contracts and settled negotiation agreements. But I will highlight some of those cost drivers in future slides. So where does the money come from that funds our budget? We have three distinct revenue sources. Of course, assessments comprise almost 80% of our overall revenue for our operating budget. That is followed by state aid in the form of Chapter 70 school aid, as well as Chapter 71, which is transportation reimbursement. So those are the revenue numbers that have been provided to us by the state. And then complementing that is local revenue. Local revenue, that $270,000, that is made up of locally generated revenue, as well as contributions from our excess and deficiency. So locally, I have the ability to generate facility rental, and interest income. Those are really my only two areas that I can generate revenue in. We do have two lease agreements where we rent out parts of our building or our property to other entities, so that grosses about $60,000 a year in revenue, as well as that interest income. The rest of that local revenue is a contribution from our excess and deficiency fund. And you will see that had to be dialed back significantly this year.
So I have a question on the state aid. Are any of those monies going to be affected by what we're dealing with as far as the government is concerned, or monies that the state might get that we would end up getting as a result?
No, I think this funding will stay intact. I think the only thing that really could affect this funding next year would be if the state did not capture the revenue that they've forecasted. But we do not expect any ripple effects from what's happening right now.
And Chapter 70 is a state-funded resource, state law. With the schools in particular, not as much the tech as probably as Nauset, but where there may be impacts would be on any of the federal grant programs they get for special ed, Title I. So that remains to be seen. But those typically aren't in the operating budgets. Those are separate grant-funded programs, which, obviously if you lose them, it's impactful. But doesn't necessarily impact the budget unless you elect to make a choice that, hey, we just can't do without these things. And then you've got to absorb it into your budget.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rich. Again, this is a numerical demonstration of really how we've funded our budget since 2019. As you can see, that local revenue piece, in years 2021, 22, 23, we had significant excess and deficiency. A majority of that was due to favorable returns on monies that had to do with the building project. So essentially, our bond earned interest, and that interest does not belong to the district. It gets returned back to the towns in the form of assessments. So over the course of a few years, not only did we return funds and credit assessments, but we also were able to offset our budget locally by contributing more money from our excess and deficiency. Our excess and deficiency fund cannot substantiate that anymore. That ship really has sailed. And so now, again, that that little bit of relief we were able to take off of the assessments to the member towns that really does not exist at this time. So we have significantly cut back that contribution from excess and deficiency.
Excuse me, I just have a question, Rich. I know we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have some folks on Zoom. If they have questions, are you able, I can't see them from here. Are you? Okay, just in case they have a question,
Yep.
you can ask them.
And again, this slide is really just showing you, the blue line is our operating budget, and the other lines are how we funded our budget. Really just to show you, sometimes as that state aid has crept up, so hasn't the assessments as well, as far as what we need to cover the operating costs. And it's easy to see again that our local revenue has definitely decreased over the past few years, kind of back to a pre-building level, if you will. So what is the money used for? This is just a pie chart, really, that's kind of gives you our major cost categories. Typically, as in most districts, our benefits and salaries for all employees makes up about 78% of our overall budget. Added to that is significant costs to maintain our building, insurance costs, and those are for building insurance as well as faculty fringe benefits, as well, and a significant portion that educates our special needs students. Again, all of these make up, as I said, about 80% of our budget being salary and benefits, and the rest really what it takes to operate the building. This is a numerical demonstration of what I just showed you. Really, it's just easier to see. Some of the things that I like to highlight is retiree benefits is nearing 5% of our budget, which is something, of course, we value the work of our retired teachers, but it is also a hard pill to swallow to know that 5% of our budget right off the bat is going to either OPEB or directly to pay retiree health care costs.
Aaron, are the retired teachers GIC, or they stay local with the group?
They stay local with Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. And right now, I have probably double the amount of retirees on our health insurance as I do our active employees. I think our active employees about 87, and I think I have about 162 retirees on our health insurance benefits. We do a 65-35 split. And so right now, our retiree health insurance line is about $600,000 of our budget. And then we also try to contribute to our OPEB funding. Again, as you can see, 10% of our budget is just operating that building. 10% is insurance benefits, and transportation is about 6% of our overall operating budget.
Have you had any problems with the getting bus drivers and all of that type of stuff? I know the region has.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult, I would say, industry out there. The one I say saving grace is we contract for our transportation. Cape Destinations is our transportation provider. And we have not, although they experience the staffing issues, we really have not felt it, other than a few times having combined routes to cover. But as far as, we have a pretty steady staff that works for Cape Destinations that services our routes, and we've had pretty good luck keeping that up.
Does everybody do you have buses that go all across the Cape, wherever they?
Yes.
Everybody can get to school by a bus.
Absolutely. We run 11 buses as far as Provincetown to Mashpee. In between that, we also, anybody can ride the bus. There are laws that say we don't have to transport you if you're 1.5 miles away from the school, but we do. We run buses, and then we run late transportation buses. We run 2 buses every night, one in each direction to take home the students that play sports or do other extracurricular activities.
Jerry?
Yeah, are you required to offer transportation for everyone? Even if I decide to drive, you still have to have a slot for me, even if I never use it?
Absolutely. We do look at ridership to see if we can't combine routes or if we could decrease buses because of ridership and those things. But we find that our students, that we have a lot of bus riders because of the geography. Also because of economic status, we have a significant low-income population. So where you used to have, some students driving themselves, it's much more cost-efficient to take the bus, or they just don't have access to getting their license. We have very high ridership, and we have very high ridership in the afternoon for after-school activities. But yes, every student has the opportunity to take the bus.
Okay, thank you.
Plenty of parking over there?
Definitely plenty of parking, except when we do our huge events. Some of our really, really big events, graduation, home and garden shows, sometimes the parking's a little limited, but yeah, there's ample parking. To the point where we actually rent our bus lot, we rent the lot to Cape Destination. So we share our lot. It helps with the contract, it helps with cost, it helps with keeping those buses really local and accessible to the school. So it's a good symbiotic relationship.
Do you own the buses?
We do not, Cape Destinations owns the buses.
I have another question. Do you have homeless students?
Not this year. Sometimes we do. The thing about Cape Cod Tech is our geographical region is so large that even if they're displaced from their hometown, typically, unless they end up over the bridge in some kind of alternate living arrangement, typically they're still in our district, even if they're out of town. We have had homeless transportation to Wareham, to Brockton, but this year we do not. As it currently stands, we do not have any homeless transportation. We do have one student who requires independent transportation. That was a significant cost driver as well, you'll see in this budget. So that is a single car that picks up that student because of an IEP mandating that that's how that student gets to school. That's a significant number because of the cost of a daily cost of a car. That is also contracted with Cape Destinations. Another inflation of this budget, and you can see from this slide, our transportation line went up from $895,000 to $1,069,000. That is because that is year one of our new 5-year contract with Cape Destination. We're in our final year with Cape Destinations. Next year will be year one of a 5-year contract. We're doing something kind of creative. Our transportation provider was awarded a grant from the CEC for EV buses. We're giving it a try and we're participating with that.
What's the CEC, sir?
Center for Economic Clean Energy, cleaner.
State?
Yes, yes. So we've received, or our vendor has received approximately $6 million. And part of that is building the infrastructure and purchasing EV buses. We don't expect the EV buses to be able to handle our entire geographic location. Certainly can't do transportation off of Cape Cod, but I think some of our more local routes are Yarmouth, Harwich, Dennis, Brewster. I think those will easily be served by one of these EV buses. So we were able to capture a little bit of the savings in that contract because of having some of that capital coming from the state. In the first year, we have planned for a full backup complement of diesel buses. So in the event that the buses don't show up in September, in the event that there's an unexpected something, which there always is, in that first year of the contract, we've built in the use of diesel buses as backup so we can kind of get on our feet. It's definitely an interesting and a little bit of a scary venture. But it's one that we have confidence in our contractor, and we have confidence in our fallback plans that we're willing to give this a try. And when we do, I think we will be really one of the only school districts on the Cape that operates a mostly EV fleet.
Might not save you any money, though.
It might not.
First year, though, you get the grant.
We get the grant for the capital for the
the vendor
buses.
gets it.
Yes, yep.
So it's going out for a new 5-year?
It went out, we awarded the contract in November, this
So
past
you know
November.
when the vendor's going to be?
Yeah. Yep.
Same vendor?
Same vendor, we only had one respondent. This was my my third cycle being involved with, and I have never had any other competition besides Cape Destinations.
Cape, was a collaborative that runs the Nauset bus.
Technically, the collaborative doesn't bid. You can invite them to tell you what it would cost to run your contract, but they don't participate in the bidding process. So in the bidding process, we had probably 6 or 7 vendors pull specs. I wrote the specs so that you could respond with either a full diesel fleet, propane fleet, any kind of renewable energy, and give me a price for both diesel and still, the only respondent was Cape Destinations. Yep. So watch, hopefully it'll be good news in the news and not, the buses on the side of the road. Fingers crossed. So again, salaries is going up 5.46%. This is a little bit misleading. I can say that the budget that we're in 25, our salaries hadn't been negotiated yet. So the salaries that were in our 25 budget were actually 24 salaries because negotiations hadn't been completed. They've since been completed, but when I put those new and updated numbers into the salaries, it looks, on paper, it looks like it's much larger increase. We did settle with all 5 of our contracts this year. They all did come in north of what we thought they were going to be. They're competitive and equal with the region, but unfortunately, we definitely had to go deeper than we thought we were going to for negotiations. Materials and services, there's a large swing there. A lot of this is due to rising inflation costs of some of the materials we have. The benefits decreasing by 1%, that is also a bit of a misnomer. It is not that we cut any benefits. It's not that we got, a fantastic decrease, because in fact we didn't. It was a 6.5% increase for health insurance. But in this budget, because of where it is, because that it's already at 5.8%, our typical line item for OPEB that we had been trying to fund at $300,000 a year, we recognize in this budget that it would have inflated it to just too high and beyond what was reasonable. Because we are ahead of our funding schedule by at least 2 years, we've had really, really great returns in our OPEB. We're part of the Plymouth County OPEB Trust. Our returns are wonderful, and we felt as though we could take our foot off the gas a little bit in this year to provide some relief to the sending towns, still contributing some, but not that typical 300,000 that we had been trying to. The last thing I want to bring your attention to is insurance. Our building insurance went up over 27% this. Between, I think, the global hurricanes, between the floods, between everything that's happening on a national level, we're seeing it here too. Cape Cod Tech is a windy, windy, windy campus, and that definitely scares some of the insurers. So our building insurance went up significantly this year. That, and also the realized cost of insuring we've been escalating what our limits are as far as insuring a much newer and more expensive building. So those are some of the major cost shifts that happened in this year. One other thing I want to bring to your attention is the absolute explosion of sports at Cape Cod Tech. In my tenure, I always said, yes, we have sports. When people asked about our athletic teams. This year, we have a turnout for sports that we've never seen before, and it's increasing the budget. But we are trying to provide access to everybody who wants to play a sport, and our numbers are through the roof. Just for example, and we probably won't do this again next year, we had enough boys basketball players to run a varsity, a JV, and enough to fill 2 freshman teams. It's not sustainable to have 2 freshman teams for each sport, and we're not going to be able to do that going forward between space and cost. But most of our sports, we're filling teams at the freshman, JV, and varsity level. So really, that has increased significantly, and we do not want to be exclusionary. So the costs of sports have dramatically increased at Cape Cod Tech. We do not charge students for sports. Again, our students are fairly economically disadvantaged, and I wouldn't want to put any barrier between their participation, their ability to participate.
Excuse me, what do you attribute that increase to?
You know, I don't know. I would say maybe it has something to do with the interest of the students we're getting. I also know that when you go to, say, Cape Cod Tech, you're able to go out for sports teams you typically wouldn't have if you had been at a Nauset or a DY, because their competition level is so high. Whereas I think at Cape Cod Tech, if you want to play a sport and you show interest, you're on the team. There's no cuts. I think that between that and we've added a few other teams. We have track and field now, and girls lacrosse. So I think that that's really just been more attractive for our kids.
Thank you.
Is there an intramural sports program at all, or is it all interscholastic?
It's all interscholastic. We do have a few other like dance teams that are kind of more club, but most are competitive. Allocation of resources, again, this chart just, as I said earlier, shows you that 78.4% of our budget overall goes to those salaries and benefits, with 10% going to materials and services, 2% going to capital, and the other is roughly about 10%. You'll also notice in this budget, we've cut down capital. And that's that last section of the budget. And that's not for need, but that is to get an attainable budget number. We've really, this year and next year, restricting some of our capital purchases, our equipment purchases. We're hoping that what we've put into the new school will last us. But we really, because of some of these other rising costs and competing costs, we've had to decrease kind of the efforts we had as far as putting more capital into the budget. Hopefully, we will be able to return that next year.
I have a question on the salaries. Is it every 3 years, or what is the process for?
Yes, typically it's every 3 years, so we are this year is year one of a 3-year contract. We have 5 collecting bargaining units, and then a small non-union contingent, but all of our contracts are settled for the upcoming next 2 years.
Thank you.
No problem. This slide in front of you is capital debt. Really, that's just showing you where we are in the capital debt payments. I believe that's next year will be year 7 of our 20-year fixed principal declining interest bond. As you can see, the total bond payment for the district overall will be $5,558,575. As you see, the principal stays level at 3.4 million, and it's that interest that we're benefiting from it decreasing going forward. So the assessment for the town of Eastham, again, reflected purely on your enrollment. This is a number that I typically am able to provide in the latter part of the calendar year, because it uses your 10/1 numbers, your October 1 numbers, and there's no other calculation besides dividing your enrollment by that total load. So your capital is based on that number, and it is $212,222 for next fiscal year. Now we take that and we add that to our operating assessment, which you know is a lot more convoluted to get to. The operating assessment really is based off of what the state tells us that your funding capacity is. It's called minimum local contribution. And then on that, we add in additional costs for capital, transportation, and what it takes to fund a school above minimum funding. And so for that, you see the assessment for FY26 will be $552,486. So all of that gets added together for your 26 student enrollment for a total assessment for FY26 of $764,688.
It's 666, I think.
688.
680. I was thinking 666.
So the formula for the operating, is that the statutory method?
Yes, it is.
Plus anything above is by numbers, by
Well,
Yes.
that's what the statutory method is. Right? Do the local, and then
And if we were just spending to local, minimum local contribution, or they call it foundation budget, it would be purely that, but knowing that it takes more to operate the school than just foundation budget, that gets calculated in on top of your assessment.
And it's the 552,466 for the operating.
Yes, for a total 764,688. And the last thing I typically like to talk about is OPEB. It is our commitment to funding our OPEB schedule. As you can see, as of June 30th, our accrued liability was $17,500,000. The balance as of June 30th, it's actually higher than this now, was $3,152,909. This actually puts us in a net position of almost 18%. Funded to liability, which I think is pretty substantial for a small organization as ourselves. As I mentioned, we had been on a schedule where we were funding $300,000 per year. We are not going to be able to make that contribution this year because of unexpected budgetary constraints due to changes in personnel and some long-term illnesses that we've had at the school. So we will likely be foregoing our contribution that was in our budget for FY25, and in FY26 it really has been decreased. We were set to be able to fully fund, or we're still expected to be able to fully fund, really, I think by 2039. Our plan is that when Barnstable County Retirement Association, when that assessment sunsets, when that becomes fully funded, we would like to take that allocation of our budget and shift that into OPEB, and that will really close us out in the upcoming few years after Barnstable County sunsets. So really, we're on I would say about a 14-year plan to be fully funded in OPEB, so long as all goes well. But we're still continuing to receive very good returns from being part of the Plymouth County OPEB Trust, and it's certainly a good collaboration for Cape Cod Tech. That is the end of my prepared presentation. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, anything from the audience. Hello, Yasmin. Thank you for coming.
I have a question, non-financial related.
Sure.
Is there a large, recruiting effort for the students? Because it's so valuable, the skills that they graduate with.
We do our best. I would say that when enrollment was a lot less, we had to recruit more. There was more.
No, I mean recruiting efforts by local companies.
Of our students.
For
Absolutely.
jobs.
I mean, they must be waiting at the door.
Absolutely.
At high school graduation.
Absolutely. So in your junior year, the latter half of your junior year, if you are eligible, so meaning you've met a certain grade level average, you have good attendance, you're eligible for something called co-op. And literally those students, rather than coming to school for their 2 weeks when they're in shop, they go to work.
So that's like the Northeastern University does a co-op in
Do they?
Boston. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's really, same thing, one
Very
semester,
well
really
attended,
valuable.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
our kids are out there, they're working for EF Winslow, they're working in the marinas, they're working for Bosun, and they're earning a very great paycheck in those 2 weeks. And our employers that take our students, they understand it's a 2-week on, 2-week off cycle. Some of them choose to take a junior and a senior because that means they have somebody consistently because those students participate in shops in different weeks. But I would say by November, we had at least 100 of our seniors out on co-op. So funny thing is, our superintendent likes to walk around the building on a senior week, and he likes to see no students in a shop. Because that means they're all gainfully employed. A lot of those students, their co-ops turned into full-time employment offers. And our program advisory committees, each one of our shops has a program advisory committee that supports that industry, and really they make connections for these students to get jobs. Some of our students, while they're in school, are making more money than I could have ever imagined. They're making in the high 20s while they're going to school and finishing their high school education.
And probably no trouble getting summer jobs, I would imagine.
None whatsoever. I talked to a young man a few months ago who drives a $60,000 truck and works full-time as a HVAC technician in his off time. And these young men, young ladies, it gives them skills that even in the shop we can't prepare them for. They're real-world skills. It's a lot of responsibility for them, but I think they're better off for it.
Town of Eastham is actually an active participant in their program. The last several years, we've always had at least one person, if not more, in our IT department. And we're talking right now with another young man about helping out with Devon and Media shop, and exploring utilizing some of their folks in our facilities department, perhaps. So lots of opportunities for us to participate, especially if they're local students to Eastham or close to Eastham. It's win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. I employ at least one student a year on our grounds crew. So these are kids from horticulture, and if they've shown the responsibility level and that they can be independent learners, they still come to school, but they spend all their time outside, maintaining the grounds with us, and the same with IT. We often use IT students. It gives them the employability skills, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Great.
I think somebody had Kate, did you have your?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Kate?
There were two things. First of all, for people who are in this meeting, if you have not been to the school, go. It's amazing. The school is extraordinary, and it's just so well laid out, and it's really, really beautiful and welcoming. The second thing is, I don't know if, I would love to have a copy of this presentation, if that's possible.
You have it, emailed it to you yesterday.
You did? Okay. I'm going through emails, Rich. Thank you. Okay, great.
Thank you for the compliments. We certainly invite anyone who hasn't seen the school to come down to the school. Our culinary department is wonderful. It's flourishing. We're constantly having functions, having tours. We like the public to get into the school. In a few weeks, we're going to be hosting a landscape expo. We're hosting something for the blue economy. And we have a very robust evening program. I would say that we probably have over 150 adults in the building who come in about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And we have many programs in the areas of HVAC, carpentry, electrical, cosmetology, where adults who are unemployed, underemployed, or just want a career change, they can come in and they learn in the evening. So as Dr. Sanborn puts it, the place is hopping from 7 a.m. until about 10 p.m. at night.
Do those
Are you
people-
doing the home and garden show still?
I don't believe it's a home and garden show. The one we're doing, it's more of a, I think it's like a horticulture showcase.
Okay.
We did do the home and garden show. Sometimes, I think with construction, when we built the school, it became a little bit more difficult to host some of these large functions. But we have in years past. We still host the Bayberry Quilter Show every summer. It's much easier for us to pull off a function of that size in the summer when the students are gone versus trying to corral students and public and all of the concerns that go along with that.
I think Roy has his hand up.
Oh,
Yeah, I have about 3 questions. First, excellent presentation. And the PowerPoint is excellent.
Thank you,
Total
Roy.
PowerPoint. Why is there a decrease in local revenue? Last year, 815,000. This year, 270,000.
That goes back to some of the preliminary slides where I had explained that our large contribution of local revenue is largely driven by our contribution from excess and deficiency, which was essentially artificially inflated by positive returns on funds that were borrowed as part of the building project. So that revenue source is obviously dried up. We've closed out our project. There really is not any substantial excess earnings. And so there's just not the capacity in the excess and deficiency fund to really be a meaningful contributor to the budget anymore.
Okay, next question. You have an expenditure item called building leadership. Could you just give me a brief explanation what's covered by that?
It's kind of funny, even though we're a one school district, we're broken out as if we were a larger regional school district. So the school building leadership essentially is the salaries for the principal, the assistant principal, the secretaries, supplies, graduation, and accreditation for when we do have to have accreditation. So essentially that line, the majority of that is salaries for the principal, assistant principal, and their support personnel. Whereas
Okay, thank you.
leadership, district leadership is the superintendent, his assistant, and finance administrative services is my salary and my department's salaries.
Do your students, the students you're getting, do they have an interest in electric vehicles and getting training in that?
They do, and students that go through our auto technology department do have exposure to that. Approximately 3 years ago, we received a capital skills grant in the amount of $230,000. From that, I was able to buy about 5 EV vehicles of different age ranges, some original, some a bit newer, as well as training equipment and curriculum for the students. So last year was really their start of getting into some EV curriculum. We have relationships with a lot of the local dealers, so they go and experience it right there in the repair departments. But yes, our students have exposure in the curriculum to EV vehicles.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of, I noticed an increase in materials. Just thinking ahead, as far as if these tariffs stay in place, you obviously use a lot of lumber. Are you planning for that in your budget for the coming year?
I think supplies are going to continue to be a struggle. Again, the supply numbers that I have here are really not what I would have liked to put in the budget. I certainly would have liked to put them in higher, but again, I'm trying to be very conservative, especially this year. We have seen the impacts already of inflation coming into the FY25 budget. It was kind of too late in the game to factor in tariffs, where this really has just been within the past, really, I would say the past few months, more of a concern. But I can tell you, today, for instance, we were looking at purchasing chairs for graduation, and the quote was inflated over $4,000 from when it was originally produced, and that was attributable to tariffs. So it was absolutely a decision that we said, not this year. We're not going to buy these chairs that we want for graduation and other events, because we're not spending 25% more on something that we know that hopefully in the future that won't exist.
Thank you very much.
I have a couple questions. I see that you are hoping to receive grant funds for special ed costs.
Yes.
What problems have you had regarding getting those funds paid for?
So typically, those grant allocations are based upon your enrollment and the economic need of the students you're serving. And that's really how it factors in. It's not that we've had trouble, but we did see a 10% cut from 24 into 25 for our grant funding, and that was across the board. That's Title I, special education, and what you call Perkins, which is vocational related. We are forecasting for that to decrease again, between funding and the fact that our economic, although we still have a very high economically disadvantaged number, it has been decreasing slightly over the past few years, just the students who are coming to the school.
So the monies that you have down here for expected grant funds, the potential to not receive all of those monies that you're anticipating?
The potential exists. it would be devastating. I would say especially in the special needs grant, that really does, that does take some pressure off the budget. I think if something were to happen, we would have to make, we'd have to shift around the chairs a bit, so to say. We did, this number is forecasting a decrease, so we definitely forecasted that funding could go down, and really just wait and hope that it doesn't.
That federal,
Yes, those are
IDEA?
IDEA and ESSA, ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. Those are Title I monies. Typically, we try not to have them be, we try not to dedicate that funding to salaries, because salaries you have to absorb if that number goes away. Special education's a little bit different. That does have significant amount of salaries in it. It's significant as far as what the grant allocation is. But as far as ESSA and Perkins, there's virtually very little salary. It's really just the, for instructional materials, equipment and goods.
I have another question. It's actually line item 212. Police liaison officer, you've gone for many years of 20,000, now it's up to 60.
Yeah.
What sort of issues or problems, or whatever you might call it, from a security standpoint?
I wouldn't call it a inflation due to a security standpoint. What I would say is that in my tenure, we've had a gentleman's agreement with the town of Harwich that we pay $20,000 for a portion of the use of one of their officers. That officer typically is there 5 days a week, a certain amount of hours, not in the summer. There was a bit of chatter last year locally in the town of Harwich, and the result of that was a meeting between Dr. Sanborn and the town administrator where this figure was what was provided to us if we would like to retain the school resource officer.
So it's the same person, essentially, it's just you're paying that person, or the town.
We're
of
paying
Harwich,
a larger percent.
60,000 versus 20.
Yes. Yes.
It's the 25, FY '25 actual, is that, did you also get hit?
No, we expressed to them when this came up that it was too far down the road for us to absorb it, and that if we were going to shift our agreement, that we needed the future planning to be able to do so. So that 60 obviously is not representative of his entire salary, but it's what the town administrator and the superintendent came up with as far as what percentage of his FTE.
Of his full-time is involved with the school itself.
Exactly.
The adult ed, is that self-sustaining or
Absolutely. It's absolutely self-sustaining. It makes a
any
bit of,
money on it or break even?
we make a little bit of money. I wouldn't say.
The local revenue?
It can go into local revenue. Typically, I can use it for equipment purchases. Some of our programs do not generate revenue. We actually have 2 programs that are completely funded by the state. They're free of charge to people who are underemployed or unemployed in the areas at HVAC. We have one program, and the other is landscape, where these students are actually paid to come. They get a transportation stipend, they get a tool stipend, and we have partnered with local industry to have instructors to be able to instruct these classes, but after a short duration of time, I say short as in maybe about 2 to 3 months, they come out with employable skills to be able to go work in the HVAC field or the landscape field. And these are programs that we're provided the money, and we provide the education free of charge to the students. And we do also have revenue generating programs. Typically that money goes back into the school or is a budgetary offset for facility rental. We can charge our adult education programs basically for the use of the building to be able to contribute to local revenue, as you referenced.
Any questions from the folks that are Zooming?
No, Rich, I do have it. Thank you. I was looking at the wrong slide. So thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Any other questions from the committee here? I just have one question. I just want to make sure I understood. You said that the allocation for all of the towns is based on a statutory method versus the alternative.
Correct.
Okay.
A big difference for the tech is, what, at 13 towns, so it's, you need a unanimous vote on the alternative, and that's near impossible, right? So they've always, from day one, been on statutory.
So it's been statutory all along. Well, I want to thank you very, very much for coming, and I thank you for coming at 4 o'clock.
Thank you for having me. I'll be back anytime. I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What do we have in what do we have in 2A for Cape Cod Tech?
What's your question?
That's the amount of money we've got in there.
Huh?
That's what we got in there.
No,
In our budget?
yeah.
Yeah, that's already been into our Article 2, I think. I'll have to double check now that you're asking me.
Okay, I'm looking at the agenda, and we are now on to item number 3, the review of warrant articles, and the 3A is Article 9A, and I believe, if I'm correct, Wendy is here. Hi there, Wendy.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. I think everybody's had a chance to look at the verbiage of Article 9A. I want to make sure that everybody understands that we are not going to be voting on this article today. This is only for information regarding the article from the petitioner. And so I'll turn it over to Wendy, and you can proceed to bring us up to date on your petition.
Great, thank you so much for the invitation today. My name is Wendy Gamba, and my Eastham address is 5 Bayview Avenue. I've been at that address for 21 years now. The warrant that you have in front of you is something that has come forward based on current facts and circumstances. And, I wanted to, start out by saying, everything in this world is up in the air right now, except for death and taxes, right? Taxes are the one thing that unites us all universally. And there's universally something for everybody to complain about. So I know it's a hard conversation, and there's no way to make everybody happy, but this warrant proposal suggests one way to make things a little bit more stable for the town. Property taxes play a really important role in public finances and are unique in a few key ways. Property taxes are highly transparent. The average person can readily tell you how much they pay in property taxes and provide you with their own assessment of their value proposition with some degree of specificity. Town budgets, particularly here in Eastham, are readily accessible. Our town administration is available and willing to answer questions, and taxpayers can easily engage in the process. Comparatively, some taxpayers, especially this time of year, can tell you what they pay in income taxes, and they have some opinions at a high level about how those dollars are spent. And practically no taxpayer can tell you what they pay in sales tax each year and have no idea what the money is for. People care deeply about property taxes because they are local and impact their daily lives. Property taxes correlate strongly to services that enhance the value and utility of property. And even when you don't use the services, the fact that the services exist, like good school systems, positively impacts the value of your property. What's at the core of this proposal is that property taxes are supposed to be stable and predictable, both for the municipality and for the taxpayer. In Massachusetts, the 2.5% levy limit further embeds the principle of stable and predictable into the process. It's notable that Massachusetts is somewhat unique. Many other states don't have such protections. What has happened here in Eastham over the past several years is anything but stable and predictable, and the taxpayer has been left out of understanding what their future tax bills might be. We have dramatically increasing tax burdens. There have been overrides voted in most of the last 10 years. When overrides become the rule and not the exception, the principle of stable and predictable is dismantled. Overrides have been approved for big and small, large items like sewage treatment plants, planning, construction of schools, land acquisitions, improvements at Rock Harbor. Smaller items, and smaller, like police station renovations, dredging, the family support package, collective bargaining, additional police. And then there's general overrides for wide use, expanding the tax base budget, or maintaining the level and quality of services. There's an acknowledgement, particularly at the select board and by several of the people who have spoken recently at select board meetings, that this type of taxing is actually actively causing harm to taxpayers, specifically full-time residents. In a seemingly uncoordinated approach, overrides for spending are being requested and approved, and simultaneously, taxpayer assistance programs are being offered to offset rising costs. Some of those examples are the family support package, senior veterans and hardship exemptions, the created but not yet launched taxpayer assistance fund, and also notable, the Community Preservation Act funding that supports affordable housing, amongst other things, had over $1.2 million in FY25 unspent funds at the end of December. This warrant requests that the town obtain an independent assessment for the future 3-year tax needs of the town. The study should assess the true local cost of housing and assessment of the needs in our town, why existing funded programs and tax actions are not fully utilized, leaving unspent funds on the table, and to objectively help the select board understand the appropriate mix of tax initiatives such as exemptions, credits, tax increases, or overrides. In part, what's fueling this request is the expert advice that's being provided to the select board is being refused without a rational argument. This suggests that additional consultation is needed. For example, recommendations by our own Board of Assessors have been disregarded. This warrant calls for an objective third party. The proposed forward-looking 3-year period is based on the premise that we have a large state-mandated projects on the horizon and that taxpayers need to understand the implications for their own household budget. Beyond increased spending, at least 2 new recurring tax streams have been introduced in recent years: short-term rental tax revenue, the 3% local option excise tax on marijuana, and new tax streams are being proposed, such as the 1% real estate transfer fee. In the last 10 years, property taxes have practically doubled. This is neither stable nor predictable. At best, the current circumstances are uncoordinated. At worst, the actions of some select board members are insincere and an affront to the experts and paid administrators who do this work every day. I hope that you will find this recommendation reasonable and necessary to help the town move together in an efficient, fair, and pro-future approach. We need forward-looking guidance that considers the confluence of these complex circumstances and introduces a planful way for the town and its taxpayers alike to move forward. Those are the ends of my prepared remarks.
Do I have any questions or comments from the committee or from the Zoom folk?
I'll start with a question. Do you have any idea how much this assessment would cost that you're suggesting?
The contracting of a consultant, I don't have actual estimates, but based on other estimates that other committees and boards have utilized for such things, maybe it's a $30,000 to $60,000 item.
And then one other question, this is sort of administrative as well. You had mentioned that there's several Outer Cape towns hired the UMass Donahue Institute.
Yes.
And I just wanted to get an idea of what other Outer Cape towns hired them, and what they hired them for, and if they thought it was a worthwhile endeavor.
I know Provincetown for sure has utilized that consulting firm or college institution. I think that if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers as to the usefulness of it. I think that some of the results that have been presented to some of our other Outer Cape towns have, have been challenged. I think a lot of the other communities, which unlike Eastham, have a lot of challenges with their town administration. Our town administration is on it. They're connected to the needs, but yet they're not being consulted. So if they're not being consulted and their advice isn't being taken, then we need to ask somebody else.
Okay, so as far as you know, Provincetown is the only town on the Outer Cape that has gone to the UMass Donahue Institute?
I would just throw that question out additionally to Tom if he knows for sure if Wellfleet or Truro additionally hired them.
I just wanted to see if I could do some research on some of the other towns and what they did.
Sure, they've used them for multiple things, including housing. And I know the Donahue Institute has done work elsewhere in Cape Cod, but I don't have the towns.
You don't have the town, okay.
I think
We can
that-
certainly get that information
Now,
for
the
you.
question here is, have they done a specific study such as what you're suggesting here, and what have the results been?
Not that I know of.
Can we have Tom come to a microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
To best of my knowledge, they have not done a study such as we are asking for here, although they do have the capability to do it from my discussions with that organization amongst other studies that we've talked to them about.
And if we would do this study, given what you've said about the select board now, what makes you think they're gonna do anything about it?
You're asking Wendy?
I'm asking both of you guys.
Wendy, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think that one of the critical pieces of all of this is informing the community and providing good, strong data for taxpayers, i.e. voters, to be able to make decisions upon. So if there are select board members who disagree with the findings, that's purely within their realm, and it's purely within the realm of the taxpayer and the voter to decide if they should stay in that role.
I have a question. Could you just explain to us exactly what process did you follow to arrive and draft this article?
This is a combination of information that we've gathered through conversations with people in town. There are issues, directly related to the RTE that has created a lot of conversation about tax. This warrant does not talk about who should pay it. This warrant talks about the issue that is underlying the fact that we need to provide additional relief for full-time residents because they can't afford to pay it. But it's not necessarily that the relief is necessary, but when your taxes are doubling in a 10-year period and they're not stable or predictable, that's actually the problem at hand. These are all symptoms of the problem. And so we and others would like to be able to get to a forward-looking approach so that residents and people can manage their household budgets. There's a lot of volatility in this world today, and we need more stability if we can provide it.
Have you ever been involved with a town that's gone through this process?
No, I have not.
Mary, I just want to offer a little bit of commentary. I think this warrant article has a lot of facts in it, and it has a lot of opinion in it, and I think Wendy's expressed some facts and a lot of opinion. But I want to remind everybody, especially the community at large, we have an extensive financial planning and budgeting process in town. We have amongst the lowest tax rate on Cape Cod and on the Outer Cape in particular, well below the state average. We are stable and we are predictable. We have a 5-year plan that is almost on target. We have a funding strategy that provides, as community has heard, and as we go through years in the future, we'll be well more attuned to our strategy of an override every 3 years aligned with our collective bargaining obligations. Overrides that occur outside of that are for specific purposes. So last year was 4 police officers, which the community thought were sorely needed and had been recommended for over 20 years. We built a new high school. We built a new Cape Cod Tech. We have a $130 million water system. And if we have wastewater system, it's going to be to offset individual property owners' costs from having to incur much more costs on their own. So I think we have a pretty comprehensive program, and honestly, in all due respect to the petitioner, I understand where this is coming from, and I understand the perspective, and happy to talk about any of it. But you're not going to find it, you know, not to brag myself, but you're not going to find anybody better than me that the town already employs to come up with strategies and plans on how to address the needs of the community. And I take zero offense to the select board listening to me or not listening to me. As far as I'm concerned, they've got a job to do. They answerable to the public, and a wise, esteemed politician once told me when I was a young man going up to the State House, is the difference between you and me is you were elected and I was elected. And so I take that to heart. The select board has a job to do, and the state law provides them this power. So at any rate, those are just my comments. If Wendy or Tom or anybody else wants to talk about and flesh out any of the facts in here, I'm happy to go through all the facts. But there's reasons why we have unspent funds for solid financial planning reasons and to provide stability and predictability. So you can't have it both ways. You know, you can't say, you know, you shouldn't be sitting on $1 million, but, you know, you're not predictable or stable.
Rich, could I just want to make a point of clarification, if that's okay. I hear the words that things have doubled. The value of my home has nearly doubled. So there's one piece that can be a blessing or it can be a curse, depending upon how you view it. I've been watching the tax rate. After I read all this, I looked at the tax rates, and I haven't been here that long. For me, it's only been, I think, 14 years. The biggest increase that I can see is when the tax rate went from $7.01 to $7.71, I believe. So that, I'm not arguing, but I think that is not doubling. It's a significant increase, but it's far, far, far less than tax rates in most other places that I've experienced. So it's just a point of clarification. I've read this with interest, and I really appreciate the point of view of everybody who came forward with this. I think it's important for us to consider everything and put everything on the table. So thank
Kate,
you.
to your point, though, on the tax rate, I think Wendy's right if you go back 10 years. And I have something, I believe I sent this to the Finance Committee a while back. If I haven't, I'll make sure I send it out. But I did a history, I think it was the last 10 years, of tax burden, not just the rate, but the actual tax being paid. And it's just about doubled. But when you compare that to inflation,
I was going to say,
you know, we are on an apples-to-apples basis, you know, we're using the same number. So in other words, 10 years ago, we didn't have a water system. We didn't ask for it. So we got to add, you know, account for those things. We were about I think it was 7% higher than inflation over a 10-year period. So if you factored in inflation, we are not too much more than what the natural inflation over the last 10 years has been. And then on top of that, you add in the things that people asked and wanted for: water system, high school, tech, and police officers.
Right, I think the perspective that I was trying to bring is what it means to the household. So I think we talk a lot about assessed values, we talk a lot about rates, but what does that actually mean? All of the information, you know, on a year-to-year basis, you know, as Rich said, is very available, it's very detailed, it's very clear for people to be able to look at. But the fact that all of that information translates to the fact that my tax bill 10 years ago was $3,000 and now it's $6,000, that's, you know, that's substantial to the individual taxpayer. And so from the taxpayer's perspective, you know, what's my tax bill going to be, you know, 3 years from now? And we factor in things like water and sewer and things of that are in the process. But to the point of using the police, which, personally, I agree with a lot of these things. It's the planning, and the taxpayers knowing what's coming so that they can plan for these increases along with all the other things that increase. So we haven't had enough police officers in 20 years, and so we did it this year. Yeah, we don't know if there's going to be, and I'm saying this as, as a taxpayer who follows a lot of what the town is doing, is there going to be any overrides presented in 2025? The warrant hasn't come out yet. On the warrant page on the Eastham website, we kind of live in this year-to-year place as a taxpayer, and I would like to know, when is my $6,000 tax bill going to become $12,000? Is it 10 years from now? Is it 3 years from now? Those are all things that factor into, how much I pay at the grocery store each week.
Mary, can I just say something? So I did, unlike Rich, I do take offense. And I took offense at the tax and spend strategy because I think first of all, it gives the select board the power to decide what your taxes are going to be or what the town is spending money on. And that's simply not true. And nobody knows that better than the finance committee because it really is a budget and then vote on it at town meeting, and then we tax. We raise the money that we need to pay for that budget that year. So I think, Wendy, if you look at the 5-year plan, the capital plan, you can see where some extra costs might be coming on, or could not be coming on, depending on how people vote at town meeting. But we can never anticipate something that's unanticipated, like COVID-19 or other things that happen in the middle of a budget year, and we have to deal with it. And this is where we deal with it between September and March of every year. We deal with the amount of money that we have, and we make decisions and we make recommendations, and then those recommendations go to the select board and then they go to town meeting. So it is the residents of the town that are making these decisions, and I would suggest to you that when you vote in 2015 to spend $130 million over the next 10 years, then you should, with that, we certainly indicated to you that your taxes would go up for the next 10 years because of that. So I think some of the things that you've mentioned are minor and have very little resulting effect on the tax rate, and some are very major, like the high school and water. But we don't make any of these decisions, nor does the Board of Selectmen. So I think that's a really important thing for everyone to understand. If people are upset about their taxes, then they need to go to town meeting and vote no on some issues, not, have the Donahue Institute study anything. And then the second thing that I wanted to say is, I don't know how you would study a tax strategy, and the town of Eastham isn't allowed to have a tax strategy. So in the state of Massachusetts, the only entity that can decide how we put taxes on property is the state of Massachusetts. And they give us a formula to work with, and it's very highly regulated each year. We have rules we have to follow. One of those is if we want to go above 2.5%, then we have to ask the taxpayers. That's a rule. They also our tax laws allow the select board to make a couple of different decisions about how that tax is spread on what property. So other than that, it would be a waste of $30 or $60 or $100,000 to ask the Donahue Institute what we can and can't do in terms of a tax strategy, because that is all outlined for us and predetermined.
If I could just respond to those 2 points, taking the last one first. while this points directly to property taxes, for the most part, there are a lot of factors that go into figuring out what the tax burden is for a taxpayer. So while the property tax formula is highly regulated and, as are most things, in Massachusetts in particular, it seems, as well as other states, there is a larger approach that we're trying to get at. It's to your response to that particular, property taxes formulary, there's nothing more to do about it. That's actually the point of what we're getting at, because there are a lot of pieces that go into this. It's not just about property tax. Where people feel it is in their property taxes. And so I continue to agree that the town does a fairly good job of the budgeting, and particularly in the big capital projects. And so I agree that those documents are out there. And as you said in your other point, that, the taxpayers can vote no. But do they really have the information to know what the actual dollar amount is going to be in their pocket when they know they're approving wastewater and it's going to be more? So everybody knows it's going to be more. I think just in the general rule of thumb, your taxes never go down. But it's about how much more. And so it's the information for the taxpayer to make that vote. And while you say the other things are small, and, and I would, materially agree with that statement, it's the sum of the small pieces. It's, the death by a million paper cuts approach of, we've got the capital projects, they're well laid out, we know how much they're going to cost, and then there are all of these little things that continue to add on. So, did we know, we've known for 20 years we didn't have enough police, but they're going to come in FY24. That we know we need to dredge every 10 years, and that means the next piece is going to be in 28. We know that there's renovations that need to happen in order to keep our buildings safe, secure, and accessible. And, those pieces are here. Those are all smaller pieces that I don't believe land in the larger, big capital project bucket. And so it's the sum of all of those pieces that go into the expense side. And then there's the revenue side and the new revenue streams. And I agree with what Rich said. There are good reasons why there are some, there's Community Preservation Act money still sitting here. But we are also at the same time trying to find a way to fund taxpayer assistance programs to offset these rising costs. So, if you were to chart it out, one piece is going this way and one piece is going that way, and these, where the two pieces meet in the middle is not clear and is not quantifiable to the taxpayer. And so, if we boil it down to a communications issue, then, and maybe that's part of the point here. I don't know, but I think having a way to be able to take on all of the different complexities here, large, extremely large, large and small, and look at them over a period of time, this is what informs taxpayers to make good decisions. And that's the piece that this warrant suggests is missing.
I respond to some of that because, Wendy, again, respectfully, this is what I struggle with sometimes, but a lot of what you just said, in my opinion, is misinformation or maybe just misunderstanding. I think the information you're talking about is there. We do a good multi-year, 5-year projection of where the tax rate's going to be. People ought to know, and if they don't know, they can ask. But one of what you just said, death by 1,000 cuts, is there's nothing new in the budgets. Every department comes to this finance committee every year and presents their budget and talks about their budgets and why it goes up. If there's any new element to any operational budget, that is typically decided as a separate thing, like adding 4 police officers. So town meeting does get the opportunity to decide whether they want to do that or not. These budgets are the same programs year after year, and it's the cost of doing business. You just heard Cape Cod Tech, and we'll hear Nauset next week. They're going to have the same message. Inflation is killing them in key areas, in health insurance, general insurance, benefits, salaries, everything. So we've done, I think, an amazing, extraordinary job of managing all that. We have a plan that every third year we'll contemplate an override to account for those things. Anything outside of that is extra, gets brought to town meeting. But, I feel like some of what you just said is a bit misleading. And so I think, in my opinion, if anyone wants my unsolicited advice, I understand where you're coming from in some of this, and I would tend to focus on that specifically, not on this broader thing, because I think you're getting into an area of some misinformation and causing, people concern that really shouldn't be there.
I'd just like to add to what Rich said. We do have, every year, we have a pre-town meeting. And the meeting this year is, let me see, I have the date, it's April 5th?
21.
April
21.
April 21. It's usually at Town Hall here. It's from 5:30 to 7:30, and everybody and anybody is welcome to attend and to ask questions and to review everything that's going to be presented at the town meeting later in May.
We changed
Change
the
the
date
date.
till Tuesday, the 22nd, because of the holiday.
Oh, okay.
21st is Patriots Day.
Oh, okay, April 22nd?
Yep.
April 26th, Tuesday, April 26th.
April 22nd. It's Tuesday.
Sorry, they just made that decision.
Oh, okay.
Can
Thank you, Jackie.
I just, I'm sorry.
I have two questions. First, for Rich and Jackie. Are there any other towns in the state of Massachusetts that are paying for a high school and municipal water right now? Because I know when you say we're still in the bottom half of the state for the tax rate, I feel like you should also add, and we're paying for water and a high school right now. We're comparing apples and oranges to other towns in the state. We're doing a really good job keeping our taxes low while paying for two huge ticket items that were needed and that people voted on. So I don't know if there's any other towns.
And saving money for a third
And
project that's coming on.
I did a little color of how our taxes went up last year.
There are certainly towns that are doing some water work and some school work, and school buildings are really expensive. But no one has done, we were the only town in Massachusetts that didn't have a public water system and that did a public water system from scratch to completion. So that was a decision that, was huge, and it did definitely impact other things that we could or couldn't do or had to defer or
I actually
whatever.
have two good examples, I think. Orleans and Chatham. Chatham's values are quite a bit higher, so not quite comparable, but sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. But they've had a water system for decades now. So that's well beyond, it's a mature system, it's self-sufficient, they've got, all the ratepayers are on board, and they've had that for decades. So it's not on the tax rate at all.
Okay.
They just, time flies, I guess, so probably 20 years ago now, maybe, put in a wastewater system. And they've completed that process, and now they're doing supplemental phases. But they were funded, and I can't remember the name of the federal program at the time, 80% of their wastewater system was covered by federal program.
And the same thing for Provincetown.
So when you compare us to Chatham, not that it's necessarily a perfect demographic comparison, but they are a lower tax burden overall. But they have a mature wastewater system and a mature water system, both which were largely paid for by other people's money. And then you look at Orleans, is similar, and probably is not a bad demographic comparison, although they have a higher degree of wealth. They have had a mature water system also for decades, and that hasn't been on their tax levy. Even with that, we were lower than them. Now they are doing wastewater, and their tax levy, their tax burden is upwards of almost $9,000 for an average household. We're at $6,500.
So we're doing well.
So,
We're coming from behind, and we're doing well.
See, I think that's one of the things that's important to keep your mind focused on here too, is we think that Rich and his team does a good job in the planning, okay? We really do. We think the town does a good job of that. But maybe it is a communications problem, because I will tell you, when people go to town meeting and they vote on something sincerely, they decide, yes, I want to vote for this override in order to raise money. Your average taxpayer, the one that we talk to at the transfer station, the one that we talk to at the supermarket that signed this, okay? Most of them do not understand, okay? This might be an education, hold on. They don't understand that, and we've seen this on the finance committee when I was a member here. They don't understand that sometimes the impact of voting on something doesn't happen for 2 or 3 years, okay? I don't think that they follow that in the regular year, because when people look at the budgets year to year, they're looking at the operating budgets. And yes, you people, the select board, the town administration has a great effort here, process, in order to review the budgets for the current year. And I encourage you, don't look to the past. This amendment is about looking forward to the future and helping people manage their planning in terms of what the tax expectations are in the town for the next 3 years. Planning is always an estimate, okay? It's never perfect. But it's something you work with, and people can adjust, town can adjust, so can the taxpayer adjust to what the expectations and the burdens are that are probably going to be on them in the coming years. And that collective view is something that, people right now in this town, and I think in other towns, also struggle with. And that's what the Donahue Institute, that's what the Lincoln Institute, these kinds of organizations are around when there is a conflict, to be able to step back and quickly, okay, look at a problem and bring back an objective opinion. Is $30,000 a lot of money? I don't think so, if it can really help the town unite behind where we want to go strategically.
Wouldn't it be better, though, for the people in town to go to the library sessions, like Rich and Jackie are doing library, I've been working on Wednesday, so I haven't been able to go.
Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning at the library, where anybody can go, ask them any question. I think a citizen would prefer to be face-to-face with Rich or Jackie than to pay, who knows what, $30,000, $100,000 to this Donahue Institute that's going to print a report that people might not read. If they don't read the warrant, they're not going to read the report. I bumped into someone at the gym that said, I was at the library yesterday, and I cannot believe it. I think it was your session, because it was a man, it wasn't Jackie. He said, I can't believe how transparent Rich was and how he knew his stuff, and he answered every question that people asked. So I think it's there, and I think people would rather, they'd rather have their questions answered at a little town hall sessions or at the library than spend more taxpayer money on this Donahue Institute that just going to probably be a packet of papers. What we should do.
I would disagree, and when you come out and you talk about Wednesday mornings, okay, that's great for people who are retired. But what about the people who are working? That's not the people I'm necessarily,
Well, Jackie and Rich
We'll
give
meet
their
you
email
anytime
info.
we've said
Every
it.
time I see the two of them, they're like, this is my phone number, this is my email.
Yeah.
We'll meet you on a Saturday, we'll meet you on a Sunday, we'll meet you at night. They make themselves really available, and the two of you, by the way, do a really good job. This is what I've heard people say.
don't disagree.
They make very complex financial data information very simple for people who do not understand finance. So I think it's there. I think a lot of people in the town, we all complain about taxes, we all complain about prices. I go to Stop and Shop and this costs this much. But a lot of people, they don't want the information. They don't want to spend the time, they don't want to read up on it, they don't want to go to the sessions, but they like to complain about the taxes. So I think I hear you, I agree with both of you. Maybe, for example, Cape Cod Tech, they did a really nice PowerPoint slide, little pictures, little things. Maybe some people need to see pictures. They need to see, I made this, I had to use highlighters because my color printer died, but I was like, maybe if we just make pictures for the people, it's easier to see. I think the information is there, and I think we just need to find a way to get people to ask the questions and to maybe go to the sessions and be comfortable asking questions that they're not comfortable asking because they don't really understand the terminology, or they have no financial background and they're embarrassed to ask questions, or they don't want to sound you know,
Uninformed.
dumb or, yeah, uninformed, that I think we're better off doing something like that and not spending more money and putting something like this to a vote and then having to call a special, I think you mentioned a special town meeting, which is going to cost more money. I just think there's a better way. And I hear you. I hear your message. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. We're all Eastham residents. We're all paying taxes in this room, or most of us. I don't want to see my taxes go up. When I look at the budget, I look at every line item, and we all do. Anything that goes up, we talk about. So, we're all in the same boat.
Building on what you're saying and what Jackie was saying, going to the nature of the article, in my opinion, this is more appropriate for something like a think tank to look at, like a statewide, because Jackie's right, we're operating within the structure of which we've provided. We've got the ability to raise property taxes. That's by far, 90-some-odd% of how we fund our budget, and that's what state law provides. If the Massachusetts Taxpayer Foundation wants to take up a study of the Massachusetts property tax structure and wants to do what Vermont does and funds local education through property taxes, which is, now they're revolting against that and going back, so is merit to how taxes come up with their tax structures. But to approach that from one individual single town doesn't seem to me to be a good approach. That's more of a think tank, and generate their lobbyists and go to the legislature and get them to pass a bill for changing tax structures throughout the Commonwealth. Because nothing can change, even if we have a study, there's nothing to change on how we do business.
Well, I don't agree
Mary,
with
can I
that,
just
though.
say one thing before Tom talks again? I guess when I read this article, when I read this petitioned article, I thought, this is very odd. And it's odd to me because it's not asking for the right thing. Because, again, we don't have the power to change our tax structure. But what we do have the power to change is what we value and what we don't value. So if you were asking us to do a study based on what services do you think the town should provide, what services do you think the town should not provide? Like, for instance, we did a family support package override. Would you like the town not to provide childcare for preschoolers? I mean, is that so people get to actually decide what capital project would they like to defer for later, and how will that save them money? I mean, those are the types of things that we talk about in this room for months every year. It's like we all want to try and cut the budget, but then we have to cut something that's meaningful to our residents or our taxpayers, and that we don't want to make those decisions. So I would be all for and would vote for a town meeting if you want to do some kind of process where we get together as a community and we do surveys and we have the Donahue Institute come out and talk about, what services would Eastham like to do more of, less of, or differently. But this doesn't work. It doesn't achieve anything, this article.
Fundamentally,
Well,
if
if
this
you
is
ask,
about
if you look at what the study should assess section in the warrant, it actually says very close to what you just said, Jackie, because we need an assessment of the need in our town. We've done a lot of work to fund programs, but they're not being fully utilized. So either the program's wrong.
Again, right,
that
I'm going to
it's not
stop
a
you right
good
there, Wendy.
fit.
Again,
Wrong.
it's misinformation.
Yeah.
Let's straighten that out.
That is not true. It
It's
doesn't.
not true.
I mean, CPA, for example, you say it's being underutilized, or no, the program continues to underspend the 1.25 million in funds it annually gets. Well, that's not right. It gets 1.25 and it spends 1.25. It's just that the money keeps coming in. We don't let it go to zero every year.
And we're saving money for important things that we know are coming up in the
Housing.
future.
Housing.
And then, the short-term rental tax, the article makes it sound like that's just money that's sitting there, but it's actually being shepherded for wastewater, which we're under a court order to address. So, look, while I'm going, I may as well keep going. The inflation, taxes have doubled in 10 years. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's close. What's the cost of a car done in 10 years? I mean, inflation by itself is probably 60% in 10 years, the rule of 72, so it's 77% a year, 10 years to double. So I think a lot of the taxes going up is inflation. So people expect their taxes not to go up while everything else is going up. You know, good luck, but that's not going to happen. Proposition 2.5, yeah, Proposition 2.5 is all well and good, but because of inflation, costs go up more than 2.5% a year. So we've got to, that's why we have to have overrides. I mean, it's simple math.
I just want to harp on, I don't want to stop your roll here, Peter,
One
but
last thing.
I was waiting for him to finish his list,
He's
too.
on a roll.
One
He's
last
on a
point,
roll.
which is in the discussion, I guess, and this is maybe what which the article's supposed to be about. The recent state decision to pull back on funding for infrastructure projects, such as our wastewater project. It's time for the select board to step back and look at all town expenditures and put together a long-term comprehensive strategy to pay for the infrastructure, education, safety, and professional services necessary to effectively address the needs of all its residents, which in my contention is that is already being done. And then the next sentence, it must stop the short-term approach to tax policies, is just not accurate. I'm done.
I just want to emphasize your point on overrides. You know, and I've been fighting this for 30 years. I've been doing this type of work as a consultant for small towns, big cities, legislatures. An override, you know, is inherently, especially in certain areas of the state, is a dirty word. And, you know, people got to get over it. It's not bad. It doesn't mean you're broke that you go to ask for an override. It doesn't mean you have bad planning. It's a mechanism that requires towns to get buy-in and do a check-in with the community. And our community has been great and supportive because I think we make the case when we go for overrides. Again, not because we're bad planners or that we're broke, but because health insurance goes up at 10%, or our collectively bargained contracts for employees who are not the highest paid, they're, you know, in the bottom to top third perhaps, go up at 5 or 6%. I think, and when that represents the largest part of your budget, then obviously 5 or 6% raises
Can't meet
over
the
the course of
2.5.
years is much faster rate than 2.5%. Electricity going up 35% last year in our budget is a lot more than 2.5%. But we manage all these pieces, parts, and sometimes that necessitates that we need an override because it's going up faster than 2.5%. It's not a dirty word. It's just the reality, and and the way I look at it is our opportunity to communicate to the community why these things have to happen. And again, we aren't adding services every year. We have the same programs that we have year over year. And again, to Jackie's point, if somebody wants to reduce the budget because they think taxes are too high, then tell us what you don't want us to do.
So I just want to add to that, you know, what Rich said, you know, and what Peter went through. You know, I think the town does have some power, okay, of the purse with respect to the exemptions that they offer people. And that's part of, you know, this whole discussion. What exemptions, what tax breaks are we giving while things are going up? Does the complete picture, okay, make sense for everybody who's paying taxes in the town? And do they understand? Again, I encourage you, let's look forward. Let's not just look at 1 year. Let's look forward so people are making the decision on an exemption, a tax increase, a fee increase, which is different, I understand. But we're looking at in context of the whole cost of living in town for the next 3 years. What's a decision made this year going to do in terms of the implications on the next 2 years, okay? And can we help the taxpayer understand that? And that's where I think part of this is coming from.
My final comments be, if this is fundamentally about a disagreement about a residential tax exemption, then the article ought to
Say that.
say that, and not blow up the whole works because, you know, you got
Yeah.
one
But-
issue.
Let's be
But-
honest.
But, no, I will not go, we are honest. Look at the people who signed this thing. They understand that, okay? If you're saying that they didn't
Private
understand what they were
Trojan
signing,
horse.
then the people didn't understand what they were voting on when they went to town meeting. You can't have it both ways.
Would you have done this if there wasn't, if the RTE didn't?
Yes,
Then
because some of the
You still would have
comments,
done this
some-
even if the RTE,
probably because the membership in the organizations and the people in the town were saying the same thing last year that they were saying this year.
And they have the option to attend town meeting and to make their voices heard.
Yes, they do, Mary.
And I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you just said. I'm sorry, not being tense here.
No, what I'm saying is that some of the comments that you've seen in this article right here, this petition, okay, are some of the same things that were written in letters to the select board in the last few years. So,
I haven't seen them.
No, they aren't, actually.
yeah, if you talk,
We have a
I
lovely
can
letter
give you
from-
individual names, Mary.
We have a lovely letter from the part-time resident taxpayers that says we're doing a fabulous job managing
Yes.
the town's finances.
You also got a couple of subsequent ones that's happened in the
Yeah,
last
exactly.
few months, okay? But you've also gotten letters that talked about tax and spend over the last couple of years. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
If this is, it's about the RTE, we all understand that. Everybody is upset about taxes going up. You can find any guy out in the street here, or woman, you can find what is unhappy about the taxes going up. We understand the RTE is controversial. There's not a whole lot we can do about it. And this petition is not going to change that.
That's correct.
I would much rather hear arguments, what are the equitable arguments against an RTE or for the RTE? What are the economic impacts of doing the RTE than to have this petition, which seems more of a stalking horse to kick the can down the road on adopting an RTE?
Jerry,
I think
did
we
you
would
have?
love to engage in that conversation. I think part of the problem is that it popped up at the last minute. And, the decision was one way on January 6th, that it was another way on January 13th. So it completely changed the nature of the conversation and the trust that had been built in the conversations and the basis for the decision being made.
It's a decision that needs to be made every year.
That's
When we
right.
have a tax classification hearing, and this year will probably be in September. So it shouldn't be a surprise because it happens every year, A, and then B, and this is why, when I got here, I pushed with Jackie, and Jackie agreed to go to the select board and say, if you're gonna contemplate this discussion has to happen in December, January. So, people have 9 months to make their arguments, to lobby the select board members that will be making that decision, and talk to them about it.
Jerry, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I'm, Wendy, thank you for this. I think it's wonderful we live in a country where we can raise these things and there's no investigation of you or anything, at least in Eastham, there's no investigation of you or anything like that. So, but I think the RTE is probably one here, and everybody knows where I stood on it, and I'm not going to talk about the RTE. But I think one of the underlying things here also deals with, for me, the hardest vote I've ever had to make in my life, which was the 14% tax increase we had to put in last year. I look at Eastham, and you talked about the last 10 years. Tom, I know you say look forward, but I think we have to look backwards slightly here. Back in the dark ages when I was in high school and college, Orleans and Wellfleet put in a water system, and Eastham kept its taxes low. That was their choice. When I was in the Army and law school, Brewster put in a water system, and Eastham kept its taxes low and didn't put it in. In the 90s, we got rid of the landfill and made a transfer station, and we didn't put anything underneath the landfill, but took the cheap way out, put it over the top, and things leached, and you get 1,4-dioxane eventually in the elementary school. So then we have to go with the water. So in that sense, we have, I wasn't here, so I didn't get advantage of it, but the taxpayers way back kept taxes low, kept taxes low, kept taxes low, and now it's time to pay the piper. And I think that that's one of the things that we face. Now, maybe we haven't done it right, and there are things to look at. And if you look at the warrant, at the moment, there's nothing on wastewater in it because funding is not coming that we thought was going to be there, and we think we can't afford it, so it's not on there. So I think the select board, you know, we don't all agree. That's where there are 5 people, not 1, so that you can vote yes or no and things. But I think that Eastham has to be aware of the fact that we did kick the can down the road for the past 40 years, and it's time now that we have to pay, and the state's on us, about wastewater, and we have to look and figure out what to do there. And Rich alluded to the fact that if we don't put in wastewater, maybe individually, it won't be on the tax rate, but it'll be on you. You've got to put in an IA septic system, which costs 40, 50,000. So those are things that have the select board, whether we agree with RTE or not, have the select board concerned. And so I understand. My taxes went up, and I didn't get the advantage of 20 years ago having low taxes, but that's what it is, and you have to go to town meeting and understand what you're voting on. One of the things when I was on the finance committee, we tried to put in the letter how much this was going to cost the median household. I mean, that's the way we try to do it, to say this is what the cost is going to be on the median household. It's very difficult to say how much it's going to cost Pete or how much it's going to cost Ron here or Jerry, but try and do that. And so I think you have to look at that. I think this requires, and I think maybe communication is it, but it really requires citizens to go to town meeting and say, if you want something, understand there's no free lunch. If you want it, we're going to eventually have to pay for that, and that's it. And there's one other thing to say, that other things come in. Back, and I know that Fred there was against it, but we hired 4 new firefighters using a SAFER grant. And that was great. So what happens when we hire the 4 firefighters? We're going to cut down on overtime and so forth. Boom. Not 2 EMTs go out on every ambulance run, but 3 now have to go. So so you get those kinds of things come in. So it's just go to town meeting, understand, and if you vote no, you vote no. I was on the finance committee and I was nicknamed Dr. No because I voted no on things. And so don't be afraid to vote, say your piece. This is a democracy and majority rules. I mean, I was on January 6th, on RTE, I was in the majority. On January 13th, I was in the minority, but that's the way it goes. So participate, and I just think you've raised some good questions. I'm not sure I agree with the article. We'll have a vote we'll do our recommendation on the select board at some point. But you raised the points, and I think that part of my answer to everyone is, hey, look what Eastham's done. Take a look at what pressures we have, and participate. And remember that everything that you want, we have to pay for. Sorry for my speech, I apologize. But thanks for listening.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity that you all invited me here to be able to speak on the issue, and that's, a sign of the inclusiveness and the ability for taxpayers to be heard. So I commend everybody for doing that here. We'd like to be able to speak at town meeting if that's possible, but, I guess we'll figure out how that goes in May.
So you just have to get the permission of the moderator? It's not a decision that anyone in this room can make.
No, I understand. I just making the point about participation is all.
Yeah, and this will be on the warrant because it's a petitioned warrant, so we
Right.
can't change it or anything. It'll be on it, so.
Why can't the petitioner speak to it?
Yeah, the petitioner, Wendy would speak to this at town
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, but, okay. Here's your chance.
Generally, I don't know if this is, maybe Rich knows. I think the question has to be moved by a voter.
I'm looking
So
at-
you can talk at town meeting if if the body and the moderator approve, but you can't move the question, and that is the legal term that, the legal remark that will get your petitioned article.
Presumably one of the signers.
One of the signers will.
Yeah, makes sense.
So you have to, get one of your signers to.
Well, Wendy can't speak to this?
She can speak to it if the moderator
Oh,
allows
the
her,
moderator
but she
said, yeah,
can't,
okay.
she
All
can't,
right.
in town meeting.
I thought by virtue of being the petitioner, she would speak.
What he usually does is ask the body of town meeting if they want to allow non-residents
Yeah,
to speak.
no, I'm familiar with what Scott does, yeah.
Usually right at the beginning.
Well, as Wendy said, thanks for your time. I appreciate you listening to us. Democracy in action, right, Jerry?
Pardon?
Democracy in action.
Democracy in action, that's exactly right. And it's fun to watch even when you're on the losing side.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Are there any other comments or questions on Article 9A? Thank you, everybody, for your thoughts. I'm going to go on to the agenda. 3B is follow-up questions regarding other articles in draft warrant. I don't,
Maybe I can give you a little bit of an update. Nothing's final until it's final, and
Right.
the select board has to vote it. But it does look like, should look at the index here, I'm sorry. That 6B may be coming out of the warrant. We'll have that discussion Monday night. And 9B may be coming out,
6B coming out
and 9B.
and 9B coming out. Well, 9B is the fertilizer. Was that the
Yes.
fertilizer?
Yes.
Yeah.
So at this point, I think you've touched on all the remaining articles. Though 6A is the only article that needs some degree of work, and that'll be a discussion with the select board on Monday. So after that, hopefully we'll have a final thing that we can get to you, or something close to final. In the draft warrant that I sent to you, I have updated it for summary explanations, with the exception of 9A. We haven't addressed that yet, how we want to summarize the town's position.
Okay.
Do you have to write a summary? Or you-
Don't have to, but I imagine we would, yeah.
These have all passed legal muster, right? The legal review.
The articles?
Yeah.
It hasn't gone to council yet, with the exception of 4D and E came from council directly. That was the eminent domain. But we do send the warrant out to legal counsel once we have a final draft for review. I'm not anticipating any problems. We're pretty astute on running the
You know what I was
articles.
wondering about on legal, on the CPA allotments or whatever you call it, that extra 30% that they want to put into the housing reserve fund. I don't know if that's legal, because you're precluding subsequent CPA committees and town meetings, not town meetings, but CPA committees.
It's legal. You got to reserve a minimum of 10. You can, the CPA committee has the ability to reserve,
Yeah, well,
And they can change their mind next year.
and they can change their mind.
Right.
You can also reappropriate it.
their mind next year, okay.
Yeah, right.
That would be town meeting to reappropriate.
Yeah.
Town meeting,
It's every year, that's why we have to do it every year.
so you're not holding the tie in the hands of the next committee, because they could just go back to the 10?
Right.
Okay.
As long as you, so if you went crazy and you did 10% in the two minimums and 80% to housing, and, subsequently you say, well, that wasn't a good idea, we should go back and change
Yeah.
that. You go back and you change it. You can't go back from 80 to 0. You got to always maintain
Always have
the
to have
10.
the 10.
Sure.
But anything over that 10% amount can
Right.
always be reappropriated.
Right.
Sorry.
I am finalizing the budget. School committee's meeting tonight, and crossing my fingers that the latest information I have is the correct information, but I'll be verifying that. If what I have is the correct information, we will be a little bit short in our calculation of the levy limit, but I'm going to make some adjustments, and I'll communicate to those to you where they reduce the budgets in some areas to accommodate that. And so if everything holds true, we are looking at a balanced budget with no override for this year. The only reason for an override would be because of the school side of things, and it looks like that's going to land okay. So we'll have a more update by next week.
That was a big sigh.
I'm a big sigher.
And if all that holds true, that looks to be about a 2% increase on the tax levy.
Best year yet. Best year since I've been here.
Impossible.
A lot better than last year.
Seems impossible.
Yeah.
Well, that's why, I never want to say anything's final until I get an
Right.
actual notice from the
Right.
school.
But it's a lot of work, and thank you, Rich. It's-
What did you say, Jackie?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said
okay.
it's a lot of work, and thank you very much, Rich, because he is amazing.
Amen.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the agenda, the minutes of the prior meeting, which was March 6th, 2025. They've been passed out, and thank you again to Mira for putting them together. The two people that were not present at that meeting were Paul and Fred. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 6th, 2025?
I think it was Patty and Fred.
No, I said Paul and Fred were absent.
But I think it was Patty who was absent.
No, I was in Disneyland watching my granddaughter dance, so I was definitely
Okay.
not here.
Right, I remember that, And
Yeah,
Fred,
I was 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was here last week.
right, Patty was here last week.
Oh, okay,
This
all
is,
right.
this is the minutes of March 6th, Kate,
okay, I'm sorry.
last week. So, as I
Okay.
said, Paul and Fred were absent. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 6th, 2025? And that's Patty. Do I have a second to approve
I'll
the minutes?
second it.
Ron?
Roy's got it.
Do I have any discussion on the minutes of March 6th, 2025? All in favor, Roy? Kate? Steve? Patty? 1, 2, 3, 4. Mary? 5. Peter? 6. I'm missing somebody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and two here. 7-0. Thank you very much. I'm looking back at the agenda. I don't have anything under new business. Does anybody have anything under new business? I think the only thing that we discussed under new business last time was the letter that we need to put together for the warrant. So that's, will be coming up.
And Mary, once I have some certainty on the school stuff, I'll draft a format, a template summary to send to Paul, and he can tweak if you'd
Okay.
like.
Yeah, that, Rich, would be lovely, and we can have a quick call. And so just help me out. So are we going to have it before, Rich, will we have everything you need before the next meeting?
I hope so, yeah. So perhaps we
Okay.
can, present a draft for the next meeting.
Yeah,
Not- I
that would be
think,
my goal.
Last year, I think what we ended up doing, we had the last meeting before the April 1 deadline was just a quick Zoom-only meeting
Correct?
to finalize the letter. If
Right,
worst case
okay, so,
scenario.
Yeah.
yeah, so whenever you get it, Rich, just give me a call, let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul, for helping us with that letter, and thank you, Rich. Under old business, is there any update on I know you passed out some information on the school building maybe a week or so ago. Is there any update on that?
No big news.
And the school facility study, that's going out to RFP?
It is, it's out. Oh, I'm sorry, Wednesday, 3/12, yeah. It's out, and the bid opening is the 28th of April. So that's for the school study, all the elementary schools, the middle school.
And that's now with 4 towns instead of just 3, right?
That's correct.
Wellfleet has joined in with the other 3 towns now.
That's correct, yeah. So that's good.
Yep. And the agreement, you're still haven't met or
Crickets.
crickets?
I think
It's
they're
not
gonna-
going to be
I
on
think-
this warrant, for sure.
Yeah, I think they're going to wait until the new superintendent.
That's what I
Oh.
think. I think it'll be the new
Okay, oh, that's a
superintendent
good, yeah,
on it.
actually, that's
That's
a good
the
idea.
sense that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Peter said that Brewster was going to introduce something. I don't know if he submitted anything or not.
well, Brewster's supposed to be putting together
Putting it all together, is that
with
it?
the attorney.
Okay.
So they're taking
That-
all of your stuff and all
That's
of
what,
Brewster's
that's
stuff.
what he was talking about, okay.
And then they sent it all to Boston and, yeah.
And then they're going to fire me. No.
Not a chance.
No, the first thing the attorney was going to do is go through the educational, all the educational laws to make sure that we're,
Covering them.
Yeah, yeah, right.
nothing that we've
because-
suggested goes against it.
Yeah,
That was the biggest piece of work that she had to do.
yeah. Okay, I'm down to item number 7, town manager and staff updates, and
I
I'll
don't really have anything.
ask you,
The
Jackie.
school study, I did get a notice today that we gotten another municipal vulnerability grant. That's Paul Lagg's grant, but I don't know the details of that. I just got, notice that we've received it, so. It's always good news when
Yep,
we
yep,
get some money.
that's right.
That might be, so thanks for reminding me on that. That requires a match, a town match. And so that might be something we come to the Finance Committee for a reserve fund transfer in the future.
You're talking about the end-of-year transfer,
No, just a reserve fund would be
oh,
easier.
reserve fund, okay. When you say reserve fund, you're talking about the 200,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Okay,
Well, let's-
I'm sorry?
Fred's just causing trouble over here.
Oh,
yeah, watch
If
out
he's
for-
going to cause trouble, he has to be louder about it. If you're going to cause trouble, you've got to be loud so we can hear it. So are you going to tell us what you said, Fred? No? I guess not. Okay,
Mary,
yeah.
Jackie, any
Oh.
progress on wastewater planning?
Well, I did our remarks. We sent the written redo of all of the reasons why we think we should get more points. We sent all that in with all the attached documentation, and I did go to the hearing, and I did speak at the hearing. And there was quite a Cape and Islands contingent.
I watched it, yeah. How about
We
how
did-
are the contractors making out?
We just had a meeting, you were out sick, on Tuesday. And so we set up a time on March 31st, I believe. I'll have to get you the date, Peter. But some point before their due date of having the work done for a 30% review, design review.
Excellent.
And so probably that'll be, I'll probably meet with them and Jackie and Hillary and DPW director as a preliminary, and then we'll bring it to the capital budget committee.
You sent out a few things. Do you want to talk about any of them? The S&P rating?
Oh, you
or-
sent them, Rich sent them out I think they were in relation to the
Yeah,
Article
well, I guess
9A.
I'll just mention them briefly. You got a flurry of emails from me in the past week. Roy had some good questions in regards to 9A, and he just wanted some information. And so one of the things he brought up was, so don't we get evaluated by Standard & Poor's? And of course, the answer is yes. So I sent out what Standard & Poor's had to say about us in their rating review. And I guess the thing I want to emphasize here is on the page 4 of that. These, you know, it's kind of hard, and I put this in my presentations every year, if you may or may not recall, but these are the factors, and there's all kinds of sub-factors that go into calculating how they rate someone. And I actually helped develop that back in the day. So I have a pretty strong understanding of how they go about this. But these bold columns here, strong economy, strong budgetary performance. The best you can get is very strong, so strong is the second best. Economy is nothing we can do anything about. It's the Massachusetts economy and where you are, and we're a part of the Barnstable statistical area. That's how our economy is based. Strong budgetary performance is based on what we return, and we've talked about this as a finance committee. If we want to get to be very strong, then we need to have over a 5% turn back on appropriations, which probably is, you know, in my opinion, actually not needed. So we're consistently around 3.5%, 4%. But very strong budgetary flexibility, very strong liquidity, very strong management. And I want to harp on that one because it's the biggest controllable factor that we can influence. And prior to me being here, it was, I think it's strong at one point and whatever one below that one at one point. And then the thing that, harms us, and everyone readily acknowledges, is very weak debt and long-term liabilities, because it's a very strict formula. What's your debt compared to your incomes and to your budgets? And we're high, because we have small budgets, smaller incomes, high debt because of a $130 million water project. So there's not much we can do about that. We could offset this. Overall, we're a AA+ community, one step below the best AAA. The only way for us to get to a AAA with our debt position is to have that strong budgetary performance, become very strong, and build up our reserves a little bit more. And I've already done the calculations. We will get by just a point or two. And they even say that on the top of this, where it says downside scenario and upside scenario.
Right.
And they acknowledge that could raise the rating if the town's debt and liability metrics were to improve, while other credit factors, including strong reserves and strong management, remained constant. So that's them telling us indirectly that we can get to a AAA and what we need to do to get there.
How often do they do this?
With every bond issuance, you need an update. Otherwise, it's every other year.
Because this is dated 23, okay.
Like October.
What's that?
I think it had an October 23rd, 23 date
Yeah.
on it. So this fall, I guess they'd be
Year old.
renewing.
Maybe this fall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, October 23rd.
And then
Maybe we can use that as the study.
well, I think that was a good point, good on Roy's,
Yeah.
a good point by Roy. You're absolutely
They've
right.
already been, yeah.
That, they do, these things are evaluated by outside parties. And then as set along this debt schedule, we've had some questions anyway. So I just want to make sure that you had the information. It is in your budget books, but this page isn't. But the difference between this and what's in the budget books is it lists every bond and the balance for '24, what we're paying off this year, so what the balance will be at the end of this fiscal year, but then it also shows you the balances for the next 5 or 6 years going out. So you can see how we're paying down our debt. And the vast majority of this $103 million of debt, $89.5 million of it is water.
Right.
But it is going down.
I think I've asked this before, but remind me, if you add up all the Rock Harbor ones, it's like over $1,045,000.
Right.
Have we spent all that, or where?
No,
No.
we have about
So-
750.
So actually, what we would like to do, and it's just not timely enough and there's some technical complexities to doing this because it's exempt debt, and so we need another exempt debt project lined up
That's right.
to utilize, but the next opportunity is probably the town landings.
Okay, that's
So
right.
if we vote at a future time, town landing projects, stormwater work and reconstruction of some of the town landings as exempt debt, we would likely, at that same time, transfer these proceeds to that project.
So we voted not to spend it and to save it for
Save it for later.
reappropriation.
Another exempt project, yeah.
And since in the complexity is, since it was raised outside the tax levy,
Yeah,
you can't just turn it over.
right, can't go back into the general fund.
Right. And then finally, one more thing. This one was the family support package, and I had to update it. I was jumped the gun a bit at the end of the year. But this shows that the programs are being utilized.
Fully.
Preschool program is fantastic and is fully utilized. School lunch, I would say, isn't utilized, but that's because we have free school lunches, so why would we utilize it? But we have maintained a balance because there's I think, a likelihood that school lunch will no longer be free. And now we have,
Christine just notified me that we may need some lunch money for the summer program.
right.
And we can use that.
So now because we did take, the select board voted to take the lunch money and add it to expand the childcare program.
Right.
So if we have to transition and go back, since we have this 400 grand from prior years that we've accumulated, we have the ability to transition back to something a little bit different if we have to go back and funding a lunch program. And then
Do you
the
have any
house,
idea how much that lunch program would cost in the summer? Did Christine know?
It's not expensive because it's really run by the church, but the
Right.
church gets the USDA funding that they don't think they're going to get. So that's free food and money. So what we have to do is have a meeting with the church and say, if we give you some money, can you
Can you
still
continue
do
the pro-
this?
continue the
So I don't
program?
think it'll be expensive. It's very little money for the service that we get. But I did, I think one of the reasons it's frustrating to me when we get criticized for not spending money is because I think, we committed to our citizens that we were going to provide free preschool for anyone that meets a certain criteria. And, we are planning more housing, and we are planning other things that are going to hopefully cause us to have more children at some point. But we also did have the savings of the lunch program, and I think it's going to be really good that we did not spend that on something else. A, and B, I don't think Wendy understands that we can't just decide to spend it on something
Yeah,
else.
right.
We
You
have
can't take the money out of the stabilization fund
we
and
have,
move it into.
we've raised it
give it
for
to somebody
this
to help
family
in their
support program, so it can
taxes.
only be spent on the family support.
Right.
One quick point too, with you're talking about the Food for Kids program.
Yes.
As a member of the Church of the Holy Spirit, there was a big fundraiser that happened last week via I think it's the Chatham Corral.
Oh, good.
And they
Oh,
did
yes, I
a
think I
number
heard about
of performances, and I don't know what the numbers are that they raised money, but it was a fundraiser that was significant. So I think that there are steps in place to try to replace the money that could be lost because of.
It's an amazing program. It really helps us out a lot. They serve
helps-
lunch every single day for free for every kid in our summer program, which is a full-day program.
And it's programs everywhere from Provincetown all
Right.
the way to, I think it's Harwich, it may even be
Yeah.
Barnstable.
Yeah. I helped out a couple of times, and some of the food I delivered was to Truro.
And they need volunteers, so anybody out there that's listening to this meeting, they need volunteers.
Great group.
Mayor, to round out the family support package, I just want to reemphasize for some of the newer members, if you may not realize or maybe heard it, but hearing it again might be helpful, is that the housing program, 100 grand a year, is dedicated to paying down the debt service of the Beach Plum property, which is probably our, once we get through, hopefully with Massasoit Road, we'll develop some plans and be our next project, housing project.
The architect is working on plans now, so we have paid for that already.
So 100 grand a year from housing goes to the Beach Plum property. So why do we have a balance in housing then? I'm also confused about article versus operating. Maybe that's the answer.
Oh, and actually, thanks, that's a good point, because I should explain that to the newer members. Originally, when this came about, the family support package was voted as a separate article as an override for $490,500. So it wasn't in the operating budget, Article 2, it was just a separate standalone article.
Oh, yeah.
But then I got here.
than I
And
got here?
I said, we're not voting this every year as a separate article. It's just part of our human service program. So I put it, so the 490 is under the human service programs budget.
You saw it in
In-
our, when we were looking at the human services,
Yeah.
the human services budget part, it was listed there.
But that's different. So we had accounts established as articles. Articles by law have the ability to carry over
They
Right.
revolve.
year to year, whereas operating budgets don't. They have to close out. So if we had unspent family support package money
Oh,
voted via an override, I didn't want to go back to free cash and not used for that
so
purpose.
that's why this.
So we, every year,
transfer of
as a
unused-
finance committee, I come to you
The
for a year-end transfer,
the transfer
because
part.
state law had recently changed, so we're taking advantage of this change in law that allows, with vote of the select board and the finance committee, that you can transfer between this legally established accounts on your books. And we
Right.
had an article account, and we have an operating budget account. So I ask you, as a year-end transfer, to take it from the unspent money from the operating budget and put it in the article so that it is used for what it was intended for. And so some of these articles, these article accounts, some of these programs have balances. And the housing wasn't utilized in the first couple of years, and that's why it has it.
So we're gonna be able to utilize that for something? That
Yes.
316, seems like.
Well,
should
we
be able
have,
to.
we just today, or not, we haven't quite done it yet, but we kind of got an agreement with the town of Orleans that they will participate with us in a lease to locals program.
Oh, good.
And we have selected a contractor, we went out to bid. And so that housing money, it will supplement some of that program, if not this year, to continue a program in the future years.
And that's also not restricted to, no income limits on,
Right.
right? No CPA or. And my last question, why are some years not the 490?
That was a question that I asked him.
484?
Well, last year is a good year. I can't remember back more than,
Yeah, okay,
so don't
let's
make me
go
go that
last
far. But last year, I think it was short $3,500.
35, yeah.
It wasn't really short. It went to Food for Kids or
Oh, yeah,
some
yeah.
other program,
That was part of the package.
because it needed a little supplement that year. So it just shows in
So
the
it's-
different, same money, same
It's supposed to be
purposes.
490. I mean,
Yeah.
typically,
It should, it's 490,
but
500
not adjusted for inflation.
total every year.
Stay at 490.
Well, it could go up, couldn't it?
Well, we could vote anything you want. but-
Voted. but was a fixed 490.
At some point, if we have thousands of children, we'll have to go back, but we're good now.
But just, not the saying we're doing this, and I think this is why we are transparent and try to, same thing with the capital budget. We had an override for 400,000 for capital.
Yep.
Yeah.
Make sure I use 400,000 or maybe $1,000 off here or there for capital. So we try to maintain the purpose for which the money was raised for as long as we can. What inevitably happens in most communities, and it probably won't happen here because this community is a bit different. But if some places that I've been, if you raised $500,000 for human service programs and you do it for 2 or 3 years or 4 years, and then budget's tight and the overrides are dirty words, so nobody wants to support an override, well, guess that 500,000 is now
Just cut it.
no longer in human services. It goes over to the fire department, or goes over to the school, or where.
Dennis does that too.
And so, we're pretty adamant that we try to stick to, exactly what people told us they wanted to do. And if that can't happen, that's a discussion, and definitely be raised at the finance committee and the select board and say, hey, we got a one-year problem here that we got to resolve. Do you want to cut a little human service funding to maintain the operating budgets intact? But it's only a one-year solution, right? Or do you want to supplement these programs with the stabilization fund or something like that?
Was the 400, if I'm trying to remember, was that ambulance? Or was that police car, something?
The 400 was,
I'm sorry?
the 400 was,
Capital
it was the
budget.
dispatch center.
Oh, dispatch.
Originally was going to be a one-time
I knew it was police or
capital
fire or
exclusion, and I said,
something
well,
like
if we're
that.
going to go to the ballot and ask people to exclude it, why don't we just ask them to exclude it ongoing basis? So we always have the 400 to put to the capital plan, so we're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
entirely beholden to free cash.
Okay, I just want to, before we adjourn, I just want to make sure that I know, and everybody here knows, exactly when we meet next and what the subject matter is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So I have on my, and we discussed last time, next Monday, on the 17th, there is a budget discussion with the select board, is that?
It's a, yeah.
No.
24th, right?
Yeah.
So that, originally I had the 17th, so it's the 24th is the budget
Hearing.
hearing. And it's not a joint meeting, or
It
is
is a
it a
joint-
joint meeting?
Budget hearing is a joint meeting of
That's
the
what
Select Board and the Finance Committee in this room,
Right,
typically scheduled the same time as the Select Board meeting.
yeah, okay, so that's March 24th, the budget hearing, it's a joint, and is that let me see, is that a Monday? I'm assuming it's a Monday and it's at 5:30?
It is a Monday, Mary.
Monday,
5:30.
5:30.
5:30?
So that's a change from the 17th, right?
That's correct,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay,
Oh, maybe it
all
was
right.
the
I thought I was
17th.
losing my
Did you
mind
change
again.
it?
I thought something was on the 17th.
We all wrote, we
No,
all
wait,
agreed with
time
the
out,
17th.
time out, it might be the 17th. Is it the 17th?
I don't think we have a meeting scheduled for
Yeah,
know.
I think it was the 17th.
the 31st.
Well,
We
okay,
talked last week that it was the 17th.
I almost, well, if it's the 17th, I got to get my act
But we
together.
just did the agenda, why can't we remember? It wasn't on the agenda, it's not on the agenda for Monday.
Yeah,
I think it might have been in the original planning
It was-
schedule.
I know it was
It's on this
originally
schedule.
But
scheduled.
we do
Let's-
now
let's
have
put
two
it that way, but-
back-to-back meetings,
We're gonna do the
17th and the 24th.
24th and then the 31st.
No, I don't know if we have the 31st.
So when are we doing the
So-
joint budget hearing?
24th.
So on March 24th, we're doing the joint budget hearing here at Town Hall. It's a Monday at 5:30.
Okay.
So next week, we do not have a meeting, but there is no select board meeting next Monday. Is that the 17th?
There is.
There is one the 17th. And what's the main agenda item?
I see Paul Lag.
Licensing, Paul Lag's articles, the zoning
Of
articles.
the zoning?
Well, I think we'll cover most of the articles.
Yeah,
Article review.
we'll go through the warrant.
Okay, so that's the 317 is only select board, and that's warrant, is that correct?
Yeah.
As the finance committee is not involved.
Nope. We can observe.
Well, we would always listen to you if you came and you wanted to say something.
Thank you. That's right. Okay, so then the 3/19th, I have that there is a town hall meeting here at 4 o'clock on zoning. Was there,
Was that one of, Paul, remember, we scheduled a lot of meetings
know.
and then we honed in. So that could have been an extra date that you set aside when he was talking about it before? Because I do that in my calendar all the time. But
Because he
as
already
far
had
as
the
I
meetings
know.
at the library.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what it
he
was,
had-
it was a
yeah, yeah.
placeholder for that.
he had,
Yeah.
one day it
So
was a
that's-
one,
that's out.
on a 4 and a 5:30.
So he is coming on the 17th.
So okay, so that's, and that's Paul, okay. So there is a meeting next Monday with the select board on the 17th. It's to discuss warrant articles and in particular, not particular, but Paul Lag will be coming in regarding zoning.
Yep.
Okay, then
Thursday.
on 3/20, March 20th, which is a Thursday, hopefully, we will have the information that we need for the schools.
Yep.
And
We'll
that
have
will
this-
be a finance committee meeting
We'll
on a
have this-
Thursday at 4 o'clock
The schools will be here, right?
on schools,
David, yep, said they would make it.
All right.
Thursday.
That's Nauset. And then also, Mary, probably ought to be prepared to take your votes on the articles.
Well, you're saying should plan on doing the rest of the, not the rest of, but the votes. We haven't done any votes.
Right.
Okay,
That's
warrant,
the 20th?
warrant votes.
Yeah, a week from today, yeah.
Thursday, this is a Monday. Then, okay, then on 3/24,
Joint budget hearing.
we have a joint budget hearing with the select board. And that's a Monday
Five.
at
Monday,
5:30?
5:30?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right here.
And that's budget. 324. And should we hold 327 in case we don't finish everything on the 20th regarding the warrant?
Absolutely. We'll
I
probably,
think you would likely need a meeting.
Plus-
but we could
plus
keep
we-
it
oh, I'm
brief.
sorry.
I said, yes, I think you'd need a meeting,
finish up our vote.
especially because the budget hearing
Right.
is
And
not
also the letter. If
finalize the letter,
If we finalize the letter.
I see we're booked in the small meeting room for the 27th.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good.
So on the March 27th, which is a Thursday, it's here at 4 o'clock. And that's going to be anything that's left over from the other prior meetings.
Yep.
It's going to be the warrant letter
Yep.
review.
In the party.
And the party.
Yeah,
What are you bringing? What are you bringing?
maybe I'll bring some pizzas or something.
Mary hasn't learned to start it at 5 and go until all of the.
Well, and have Jackie bring dinner.
Remember, we had the formal break, too. It was
Yeah, we
really
did.
weird. They had to put something on the screen. The finance committee's eating.
We could start at 4 and still have her bring dinner at 5:30.
Yes, you could do that. It's your call. I'm not on the press.
We have a full kitchen. I could do it.
So I just want to say after the 27th meeting,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
thanks to all of you, because you've done a lot of work and seen gone through a lot of stuff. But after the 27th, you get a whole month off, so congratulations. Get some
Wow.
I
rest.
can read a book, read an actual book. Okay, so I just want to, I hate to be a pain in the neck, but I just want to go through everything here. So next Monday is this March 17th. It's a select board meeting. There's going to be discussion with Paul Legg on the zoning, and they're going to be going over the warrant articles, and it is not a joint meeting with the Finance Committee. On Thursday, March 20th, and that select board meeting is at 5:30. On Thursday, March 20th, the Finance Committee will be meeting at 4 at Town Hall to discuss the schools and go over the warrant votes. The following Monday, on March 24th, will be a Select Board joint meeting on the budget here at Town Hall at 5:30. On Thursday, March 27th, there will be a Finance Committee meeting at 4 o'clock here at Town Hall to discuss anything left over and the warrant letter review. Have I,
You nailed it.
and then when does everything go to print?
Usually around the first of
April,
April.
April 1.
Of April, right?
Yep. The town report went to the printer. It goes tomorrow.
Okay, and also just as we were discussing, because that time was changed, I had it down here, that's April 22nd
Yeah.
from 5:30 to 7:30 is the pre-town meeting. And that is at Town Hall also, right?
Yep.
Tuesday, April 22nd, 5:30.
5:30, you said, Mary?
Yes, Kate, 5:30, it's scheduled for 5:30 to 7:30 at the moment.
Okay.
April 22nd?
April 22nd, that time has changed from
I'd have to miss
a
that one.
while back.
I think it was listed as the 21st. on
It
the
was,
original
that's what I have
And then
down
we
here.
realized it
Yeah,
was a
that's what I
holiday.
had, Yeah, that's what I did,
Yeah.
April 22nd, 5:30 to 7. Well,
I
it
still
starts
have
at-
to check that out with the moderator, but. I'll call
Oh,
him
that
tomorrow.
date?
Yeah,
Oh, because you changed it from the 21st?
yeah,
Okay,
Scott.
pre-town. Okay, any questions on anything I've just gone over is in regards to the schedule, ongoing schedule? Okay, thanks, everybody, and thank you, a special thank you for everything and all the time that we've put in here. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Patty, and do I have a second?
Second.
Ron, and Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Everybody's here, what? 8, 9, 9, 0, right?